Good afternoon, everybody. Here we are again. Sorry about last week. Occasionally things come up and I always try and let you know if I'm not going to be here, but I wasn't able to last week. But I'm here today. So hope everybody's well. Great to see everybody still talking about the case and spreading the word and talking to other people and everything. That's excellent. I thought today I would try to explain some of the obstacles that we face in trying to take this case forward, because I know, I've seen lots of people saying, well, why can't we do this and can we do that and can we go this route and that route? And it's difficult. I think it's difficult to accept that the system doesn't work the way most of us think it should work, and we're not dealing with how we would like it to be. We're dealing with how it is, and that's where a lot of confusion comes in. That's where a lot of people get, I suppose, frustrated that, they'll make a suggestion, can we do this? No. Well, why not? And then the explanation of all the reasons for that make no sense in reality. If this was about justice, then these explanations begin to sound like excuses, but they are what the system says has to happen. So I thought I'd start with the letters to MPs. And yes, writing to MPs is a good way to go, but as a lot of you have seen, the response has been, we can't comment on individual cases and we can't interfere with judicial matters. Well, that's only partly true. They won't comment on individual cases, we know that. But the Hillsborough Independent Panel, the inquiry, came about through political pressure. The Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission and the English counterpart also came about because of political pressure. So my idea for writing to MPs, rather than just saying you need to look at this case, we need an independent review, was to point out that there is a serious crisis in confidence now in Scottish justice. I know from the messages I've had from so many of you that are suffering the same injustice, who've been through the same things, and nobody's getting anywhere. And we have to remember that in a democracy, we're both governed by consent and policed by consent. So when MPs are saying we can't do anything about this, we can't interfere with judicial matters, and then they come away with, because you've got the SCCRC, the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission. Let me start with them and then I'll come back to the politicians. So in Scotland, when a conviction's been obtained and you apply for an appeal and the appeal fails, you then have to go to the commission. You can't go back to the Court of Appeal, it has to go through the commission. And the commission is supposed to be an independent body that looks at cases to see if there's been a miscarriage of justice. So let's start with some numbers. On average, the SCCRC refers 3% of the applications it receives back to the Court of Appeal for appeal against conviction. 3%. On average, there's 8,200 prisoners in Scotland at any given time. So that's 246 families that the commission agrees something went wrong. Now, like I said, to get to the commission in the first place, you have to have had a trial and you have to have had a first appeal fail, which means that to send it back to the Court of Appeal is an admission that it's been wrong on at least 2 occasions. So that's the first thing about the commission. Now, some people might say, well, 3%, if that represents the number of wrongful convictions in Scotland, that's not a huge number. It's not a particularly high number. Well, I don't think it does represent the number of wrongful convictions. It only represents the ones that the Commission thinks should be sent back to the Court of Appeal. The politicians would use that 3% as a way of saying the justice system's doing it right most of the time, 97% of the time. Like I said, I don't accept that 3% is representative of the number of times things go wrong. But there is another possibility about why more cases are not referred back to the Court of Appeal by the SECRC. And it might be that, just like their English counterpart, the hands are tied. There are specific rules and levels to be reached before the Commission can send a case back to the Court of Appeal. And in so many cases, there are so many boxes to be ticked that worthy cases that you would think should be allowed to go back to appeal, can't get past all of these obstacles via the Commission. There is one other example that I wanted to talk about, and that does include Luke's case, because, as you know, Luke's case was entirely circumstantial, and it was explained to the jury that these pieces of evidence wouldn't stand alone. It was only by linking them all together that they gave weight to this narrative, this story that they were asking the jury to decide on. So far, so good, or so bad, depending on how you look at it. When the case went to the Commission, they looked at things like Luke's rights being breached, evidence not being released to the defence, all these different bits and pieces. But they didn't add them together like they did at the trial. And the question is, why not? If all the individual bits were tied together to make a strong case for conviction, then you would have imagined that all the individual bits that showed where things went wrong should have been tied together to give weight for a referral back to the Court of Appeal. That didn't happen. So this idea that the SECRC is independent and a safeguard, which is why governments don't interfere, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And now we have this situation where we have all these police failings in all these different cases. And then we have remember, every conviction starts with a police investigation, every single one of them. So if we know, and if lots of us know, that the police are not doing it properly at the beginning, then that can only follow through the whole process, through trial, and what the prosecution's case ends up being, and all of that starts at the stage of the police investigation. So even if we're saying to MPs, this case landed up here, but it landed up here because of this, and this, can they then say, well, we can't do anything about the police either? We can't hold the police accountable. Is this because that's the natural route that argument would take? So in England, in the Westminster Parliament, they have things called all-party parliamentary groups, APPGs. And what they are is essentially, if MPs from different parties have concerns about the same subject, they can come together as a group and say, okay, we need to have a look at this because, you know, there's concerns, political differences aside, there's concerns. And they set up an APPG and do an investigation and publish their results. They make recommendations and things like that. Excuse me. So the last two APPG reports that I read. One of them, the first one, was about what they called disclosure failings, police disclosure failings. Yeah, hiding evidence. But they did a whole report on this, and they made all these suggestions for what should be changed and how it should be changed and what should be stopped happening and how things could be done better. The next one was about the CCRC itself and things that were going wrong there. And one of the big things one of the big findings in that APPG report was funding. That they cut and cut and cut and cut and cut funding, while applications to the Commission are going up and up and up and up. Now, if we're to believe that this 3% figure in Scotland says that, you know, the justice system is doing a good job, why are the number of applications increasing? I mean, you know, is everybody swinging the net? I don't think so. They're increasing because there's more wrongful convictions being obtained. Now, how many APPGs do you think we have or we've had in Scotland? We don't have APPGs in Scotland. So tell me how we are supposed to get things looked at the way the police disclosure failings and the CCRC in England were looked at in depth, and suggestions and recommendations and criticisms published. How are we supposed to do that in Scotland if we have no process by which to create these groups? So I had a little look into it, and it can be done. They don't call them APPGs, but it can be done. And essentially, it's if enough MPs across the parties express concerns about a particular thing, let's say justice in Scotland, maybe, or policing in Scotland, maybe. If enough of them express concerns, they can form a group and they can move forward to have an investigation done and recommendations and everything else. So that was I was really pleased that people wanted to write to their MPs and you know, that whole thing took off. But my concern at the time was that it was going to come back the way it did, with them saying we can't talk about individual cases, which kind of brings me to something else that I wanted to talk about, and that's the number of groups that there are at the minute. I cannot keep up. I honestly, I can't keep up. And people going about doing different things in different ways, and I can't keep an eye on all of them. Goodness me, Martin Baird, do you not think it's time to stop flogging this dead horse after 17 years, a fair trial and 2 failed appeals? Do you not consider the victim of the family of the victim? Yes, I do, Martin. And I'm coming to the appeals. If you just be patient now, I'm coming to the appeals. But this isn't a dead horse. I know people like you would love it to be a dead horse. It's not. It wasn't a fair trial. And anybody with a brain cell can see that it wasn't a fair trial. And I have said this so many times. I do this as much for justice for Jodie as I do for justice for Luke. Because anybody that can look at this case and look at what was done in the name of justice for Jodie can see that was not justice for Jodie. Absolutely not. And that's why we're all still here, almost 18 years later. So no, not a dead horse. Absolutely not a dead horse. To give up on this would be to give up on justice for Jodie as well. So thanks for that. Where was I? That just threw me. Groups, yeah. So I can't I can't keep up with everything that's going on and who's saying what and all of that. But somebody posted about the protest that someone in a group, one of the admins, I believe, said, Sandra says we're to wait, but no one knows why. That's not actually the case. I asked two of the groups for a Zoom call where I could talk to everybody so that everybody was on the same page, working towards the same goals, that we didn't have some people going off in one direction, some people going off in another, and all of that, so that there was no confusion, so that everybody knows what's happening. I had one Zoom call with one group and we had our discussion, and that was all absolutely fine. I am still waiting for a date for the Zoom call with the other group. So it's not that nobody knows why. I explained very clearly why we all need to be singing from the same hymn sheet. So I'm waiting for that time and date. And then once we can get that sorted out and we know where we're at, then we'll continue to update on the protest. Martin, you're here for personal financial gain, I suspect. Profits from books, videos, documentaries. No, there's no money from the documentary. There's no money from podcasts. Yes, there's some money from books, but a tiny amount. So behave yourself, Martin. If you're only here to cause trouble, right, I'm just not going to answer you anymore. Or you're being a child. Right. The appeals, yes. So some people are saying he's had 4 appeals, Luke's had 4 appeals rejected, and some people are asking why the appeals were rejected. So what we have, there was the initial appeal in 2008. So that was the, 2008. That was the appeal against conviction. And there was also an appeal against sentence. So we know that first appeal failed. I'll come back to that in a minute. The appeal against sentence it took ages. I think it was another couple of years. They never made a decision on that. The next so-called appeals, what they were calling appeals, were applications. So they didn't go to full appeal. So the application to the Scottish courts on the Cadre point, I spoke about this recently, and then the application to the Supreme Court for the Cadre point. So those were the applications. They were not full appeals. They never happened as appeals. So I can't remember if I explained here the Cadre point. In 2000, I think it was 2011, the Supreme Court ruled that Scotland had to stop interviewing people without access to legal representation. They had to stop it. They've been warned on a number of occasions up to that point. But the case that made this decision was called the Cadre Case. And they said, right, that's it. It has got to stop. And the decision was that anybody who still had live proceedings in a case could put in an application for the Cadre point to be taken into account for their appeal. Now, at that time, Luke's sentence appeal was still outstanding. They hadn't made a decision on it. And the media were openly saying, they were speaking to lawyers and legal representatives, and they were openly saying, in this case, it's a classic Cadre case. They would have to overturn Luke's conviction. They would have to. But we had to first apply to the Scottish courts for permission to include a Cadre point or a Cadre appeal. And then if they rejected it, we could go direct to the Supreme Court. Now, this is nonsense. we could go direct to the Supreme Court, but only after we'd been to the Scottish court and been turned down. So we went to the Scottish court, and basically, because of that, they knew that we were going to be relying on the sentence appeal as being still live proceedings. They turned us down, and we got the application ready to go to the Supreme Court. And 2 days before we were ready to lodge it, they made a decision on the sentence appeal. And the Supreme Court wouldn't accept it because there were no longer live proceedings in the case. That, I thought I'd seen every dirty trick in the book up to that point. That one, it was so transparent. It was so transparent. These legal experts were saying in Luke's case, the Cadre point would definitely mean the conviction had to be overturned. And they got us 2 days before on the technicality that there were no longer live proceedings in the case. So yeah, there's an example of how they can manipulate their own rules to suit themselves. Why was in particular the 2008 appeal? Why was it rejected? There were lots of points. I think there was 8 points of appeal for that appeal, and it's difficult to believe some of the stuff that they justified to uphold the conviction. So, for example, when it was argued that Andrina Bryson, the people that Andrina Bryson saw, didn't match the descriptions of Jodie and Luke originally, the Court of Appeal basically said, well, the jury was entitled to infer that the girl that Andrina Bryson saw could have been Jodie. Not was, just could have been. Now, in a case where or in any case where conviction is supposed to be beyond reasonable doubt, proof beyond reasonable doubt, could have been is so far away from reasonable doubt, beyond reasonable doubt, that I don't know where to begin with that one. We also had the case where the advocate, oh God, I've forgotten his name now, Mr. Beckett, for the Crown, said that the DNA, the new DNA that had been found, was no match whatsoever. Don't know how we got away with that, because it was the Crown who alerted Luke's defence team 3 years after the murder that a full DNA profile match had been found from the condom. So again, for him to be able to stand up in court and say that DNA was no match whatsoever, when the Crown found it, the Crown told the defence, this is a DNA match to the DNA in the profile. So it's things like this, all the technicalities, the argument about whether the Section 14 interview should have been used as evidence. So this is when they've got Luke in the room with the 3 grown men, and he's not allowed access to legal representation. He's not allowed to speak to his mum. The responsible adult sits there the whole way through and says not a word. So the idea that what was elicited from that interview, that interrogation, the defence said shouldn't have been allowed as evidence, because what they did was, in the words of Donald Finlay, they cherry-picked bits of that interview. So after hours and hours of goading when Luke finally snapped back, that was the bit that the jury got to hear. Not all the voting before it, not at all, just that bit. And the idea was to make him look as belligerent and to have no respect for authority and all of that. That's why it was done. And the appeal judges concluded that yes, the behaviour of those officers was outrageous and to be deplored, that they had lost it, but that no harm had been done because Luke didn't confess. And they actually said he gave as good as he got. A 15-year-old kid against 3 experienced police officers. And the appeal court concluded he gave as good as he got. Well, there you go. That's how our justice system works. One of the other points was about Luke's brother's evidence and the way that had been manipulated. And the judges said, well, yeah, if his brother had... Donald Finlay put it to the court that they tried to break his brother the way they tried to break Luke. And the appeal judges said, well, yeah, if he'd been a suspect, that evidence wouldn't have been allowed. But he was only a witness, so doesn't matter. Wrong. He was a suspect. He'd been arrested for attempting to pervert, on the accusation of attempting to pervert the course of justice. So he wasn't a witness, he was a suspect. And his entire interrogation, having been laid out on the road, bundled in the back of a police car, not told what was happening till they got him to the police station, and then all the threats about him going down as well if he didn't tell them what they wanted to hear, all of that, all of it done under the pretense of an attempt to pervert the course of justice. So what part of attempting to pervert the course of justice was involved in threatening him and calling him a liar and telling him if he didn't tell the truth, the truth that they wanted to hear, he'd probably be going down as well? Where is any of that related to an attempt to pervert the course of justice? So these are all examples of why, or reasons that the judges gave for the appeal failing. Most of them don't stand. Most of them don't stand. And that's where it's so frustrating, because once an appeal like that has failed, for whatever reasons, you have to go to the commission and try and get them to have a look at it and agree with you that something has gone terribly wrong. And, well, as I said earlier, only 3% of applications to the commission end up in a referral back to the Court of Appeal. Don't think it's a particularly good record. Now then, let me see. There was something. Jodie's clothes for testing. Now again, this is one of these things that explaining to people what can and can't be done is really, really important, because like many of you, I think we should just be able to go there and say, give us everything, give us the lot, and we'll test everything. Doesn't work that way. We can't do that. They would never give us it for a start. So we have to be very strategic about which things we ask for and the reasons we're asking for them. Because, as I've explained before, this idea of needing good reason to make these applications, good reason is not, in legal terms, it's not what we think is good reason. This guy's innocent. This case went badly wrong. This was never done. To us, these are good reasons, but not to the courts. Not to the courts. They want legal good reasons. And just saying, you know, we want everything retested. They say it's a fishing expedition. You're just looking for any old thing, see if you can get something. So we have to be able to say, this is what we're looking for, this is why we're looking for it, and this is what we believe will be significant about it. So obviously I can't talk about those things in detail, but it's to let people understand that, you know, if I had my way, yeah, I'd just go up there and, right, come on, give us everything. But we can't do it that way. We can't do it that way. And we do have to be like really strategic about which stuff and when and how. Okay, there was something else came up there and I can't remember what it was. You have to excuse me, I was not as well organized today as I like to be, just because other things got in the way. We do have, now, there will be a couple of updates in the next couple of weeks. I can't say anything about them right now, but there are things ticking away in the background. So I will keep you informed as and when I can. There's something came up there and I've lost it. What was? Oh, that's really annoying now. Nope, it's gone right out of my head. Let me see if I can find the one that was here. Sorry about this. No, sorry, it's gone completely out of my head. Oh, there was a question about Jodie's aunts in the car park and being there before the search trio were taken back up to the car park. So for them to have been there at that time, because they came from a couple of villages over, so you know, they need a fair bit of time to drive there. For them to have been there before the search trio got back up to the back of the school where they were taken back by the police, they'd have to have left round about the time Jodie was found. And we don't know how they came to be there. We don't know why they went to the school, of all places, instead of going to Jodie's mum's house. They were waiting in the school car park. But there was a suggestion that maybe someone was calling them from the path, and that's why they came to the back of the school. Now, there's nothing suspicious about that. If one of Jodie's relatives, they found Jodie's body, everybody's in hysterics, they're waiting for the police are running about all over the place because they don't know where the path is. There would have been nothing suspicious about them phoning the aunts or phoning one of the aunts and saying, you need to come over, you need to go and be with Judith, or there's nothing suspicious about that at all. Except that they didn't go and sit with Judith. They went to the school car park. But the point that I wanted to make is the cops were screaming at Luke that he'd made a phone call, or he'd retrieved a voicemail just after Jodie's body was found. Neither were true, as a matter of fact. Again, more trickery. It wasn't true. That the voicemail was actually Corinne leaving a voicemail saying, where are you? I need you, I need to know what's going on. So that had gone to voicemail. I hadn't opened it. And the other one was a text that was sent after the phone was in the possession of the police. But the point I'm trying to make here is they didn't even take the other searchers' phones. So if they thought there was something terribly suspicious about phone calls being made or received from people on the path, then surely that should have applied to everybody. And once again, we have this applied to Luke, didn't apply to any of the others. So in terms of why were the ants there, I don't know. How did they get there so early? The only explanation can be that somebody was calling them from the path, because, well, we know the calls didn't come from Judith's landline or mobile. Although Judith did say that she called one of her sisters, I think she said about 10:30 when she knew when Jodie hadn't come home. But this is an hour later, so it's a difficult one. I don't know. And like I said, there wouldn't necessarily have been anything suspicious about making calls from the path after Jodie's body was found. Everybody would have been in absolute hysterics. But it was considered suspicious on Luke's phone, but they didn't even check anybody else's phones. Right. Was there not someone else reported jumping about at the school? Not officially. Not officially. I've never got to the bottom of that. Somebody posted on Facebook that they'd been walking down to the school that evening, school concert time basically, and a man had been acting strangely and following them, and they started to run, and he started to run after them. They ran into the school, and he continued on to the path at the back that leads to the woods. I have tried to contact these people, tried to message them just to see, would you be willing to give a statement about that? But I've never been able to get a response from anybody, which is a real shame, because that, again, it's something that if that was, they also said that these people actually said that the police spoke to them and came and took statements and said that, you know, they would probably have to go and do an ID parade and everything, and then the police never came back to them. So yeah, these would be interesting people to speak to if they'd be willing to go on record and give statements to that effect. But I haven't had any response to attempts to contact them. So if anybody knows them, and you know, if they'd be willing to speak, I don't want to put pressure on anybody, but if they'd be willing to go on record, that would be quite important information to have. Now, just talking about jumping about the back of the school, so that was one of the original misunderstandings. Luke had called the police to say that they found Jodie's body. Then the police called him back to say, where are you? Because our two police officers that are out there can't find you. And while he's still on the phone to them, Stephen Kelly, then 6 minutes later, dials 999 again, going, where are you? You know, we phoned you an hour ago and all of this. So this officer, he says, he radios in, I think there's been a wee falling out. That's why he's galloping about at the back of the school. So at that point, that officer obviously believed that Luke and Jodie were together at the back of the school and that they'd had an argument. How he came to that conclusion, I will never know, because Jodie's family knew that Luke hadn't seen her that night. And Jodie's family knew that, or at least her mum knew, that Luke was coming up the path to her house on his own. So where this police officer got the idea that there'd been a wee falling out and Luke was galloping about at the back of the school, I have no idea. But he hadn't moved since Jodie's body was found. They were all at the V point. And I think this galloping about thing came from a belief that the two phone calls, so the one with Luke and the one from Stephen Kelly, I think the police thought that was the same person, because when they were speaking to Kelly, it was painful. It was painful. He's saying, you know, the police were in the mum's house. They're supposed to be meeting us here, which I thought was a strange thing to say, but never mind. And this police officer thinks Stephen Kelly's saying he's in Jodie's mum's house. And then he says, no, we're down on the path behind the school. And he says, well, why did you say you were in the mother's house? And it was just total confusion. But I do believe that they thought both phone calls came from the same person. And this idea of galloping about, he's running up to Jodie's mum's house and he's running down behind the janitor's house and he's down on the path. No, that was all total misunderstanding, just not listening. So yeah, I saw another. Yeah, the recent incident down in that area about a month ago, maybe. It was reported that no crime took place. So, are there any other witnesses that would now be willing to talk to the authorities, Jackie Henderson? Yes, there are. Yes, there are. A number of people have come forward, and some really valuable information has been brought to us. So those people will, they're willing to give statements. So we'll get those statements recorded. Like I said, I'm having to be guided about the best legal routes to take here. I can't take information or statements from anybody. I can't do that. Because if I do, they'll simply say that I could have influenced what the people said. So when people do get in touch, I explain I cannot ask you any questions. Tell me your story, I'll note it, and then we'll get somebody to come and take proper statements when the time comes to do that. Because if I take them, they'll dismiss it instantly and say that, you know, maybe I asked leading questions or influenced the witnesses or whatever. But yes, Jackie, there have been a number of people who've come forward with information we didn't have before, and it makes interesting reading. So again, we can't update on that anyway because these people must be kept anonymous, absolutely must be kept anonymous, and I wouldn't discuss them or the information they've given us. I'm just answering the question that yes, there have been people willing to do that. There was something else. A victim of crime can make an application to criminal injuries in all circumstances. Yeah, I don't know what that's about. I think there must have been a conversation. Yeah, so Jim, we were talking about getting the clothing. So Jim Nelson's saying good reason to get the top as the new DNA techniques will pick up what was missing in 2003. Potentially, that's potentially good reason, but again, it's not as straightforward as that, unfortunately. Yes, the new techniques would be an argument that since there was no DNA found at the time, new techniques might find significant DNA that wasn't found at the time. So yes, it's a potential argument. Again, there are quite specific obstacles to be overcome to get to that point. Okay. Yeah, most people all want the same thing: look free and the real killer brought to rights. Yeah, and I think anybody that can't see that, anybody that wants to argue against that, is being, what I used to call confidently ignorant. The people that know what they know and there's no persuading them. Yeah, so to go back to the groups thing for a minute, we are all literally learning as we go along here, step by step, on the hoof. There's no practice for this. There's no you know, let's do it in advance because we've done it a million times before. This particular set of circumstances after the documentary, I didn't see it coming. And the group, the official group, had already been discussing Luke's case prior to the documentary. And it was because of the making a murderer thing and the way groups just appeared everywhere, and it was just like massive. A couple of people in the official group had said to me, look, try and be prepared for this, as best prepared as you can. We'll get a little group ready to answer questions just in case it goes nuts. And I was thinking, well, yeah, okay, because the Frontline Scotland documentary went out and then died away in nothing. So I wasn't expecting the response that we got. And the speed at which the questions and comments started coming in, it was just incredible. And then trying to keep people right on what they could and couldn't say and all of that. Again, the people in the official group had already been involved in discussing Luke's case, so they knew some of what we could and couldn't say and all of that. So like I've explained here, even things as simple as getting samples for testing, it's not just as straightforward as we would like to think it is, and a lot of care needs to be taken that well-meaning help doesn't end up doing damage. That's my only concern. I know there are people who are saying things like, you know, Sandra just wants to control it all and she wants to be the one pulling all the strings. No, I would happily hand over the whole thing tomorrow. But what I'm doing right now is trying to protect the case, protect Luke, protect Corinne, protect the case. Not just for today, but for the consequences, the future consequences of anything that's done now that could have a consequence later down the road. So I hope you understand that. I know everybody wants to help and everybody's furious that what's happened's happened, and it's so difficult to put it right. Unfortunately, we're dealing with what we're dealing with, and it is frustrating and it is wrong, terribly wrong. But we have to try and put it right via the system that got it wrong, and that's a difficult ask. Okay, now then, there was a question early on, and I can't find it. That's very annoying. Does anybody have any questions at the minute? I don't have anybody doing my questions this week again. So if anybody's got questions now, we're almost done anyway. But I wonder if the police still have all the evidence, Elizabeth. Me too. I have nightmares sometimes that we finally get permission to apply for evidence, and then they tell us either it's lost or it's been destroyed or things like that. And I've seen it happen in other cases, and that's why I have nightmares. It would be It would be beyond horrifying if that were the case. We can only hope. We can only hope. Yeah, Paula, my guess is a lot will have been destroyed after conviction. It's not supposed to be. They are supposed to keep it, but who knows? Hang on. Somebody. How long do you think before Luke's freed? Morag. I don't know. I don't know. I have no way of knowing. None of us does. And that is what is so hard about this. The idea that another 5 years, 10 years, it's unthinkable. It's unthinkable. But it's not impossible. And that's why we have to keep on this. We have to keep the pressure on it whilst up front, whilst finding ways behind the scenes to drive it forward through the official channels, through the legal channels. So how long? I have no idea, Morag. I'm sorry. I try not to think about it, to be perfectly honest. Kenneth, the trolls were out today. Well, the trolls are always out, and they get awfully excitable sometimes, and it's a little bit of distraction, nothing more. It's really, really sad that they've nothing better to do with their time, and they do sometimes do damage as well, but don't. Yeah, occasionally I will answer the odd one or two, but generally you just got to ignore them. What was that question? Give me a second. You're all going too fast again. If somebody today admitted to it, what would it take to get Luke's conviction overturned? Well, it would depend on what the confession was, how it was done, the mental state of the person given the conviction, whether given the confession rather, whether there's any other evidence to support that confession, and so on and so on and so on. Again, it's not as straightforward as people might think. You know, you think if somebody walked into a police station, my name is me, they'd be like, oh, excellent, let's get this lad out and get him in his place. Doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that at all. And I'm not saying somebody did that. I'm just saying if you would imagine if somebody did that, that would be it. But no, it's still got all the same obstacles to go through, all the same hoops to jump through as any other development. Somebody asked about do you think the police will ever admit their wrongdoing? No, they rarely do. Even when they're proven to have done wrong, they rarely do. What would you say safe activism, given the media already gave bad press about the groups, i.e. reaching COVID to visit the murder scene and film it? Ruthie, I don't know anything about the media saying people were breaching COVID to visit the murder scene and film it. And I don't know how that would be breaching COVID. Anyway, I don't know anything about that. But safe activism, common sense, you know, be respectful. Don't damage people's stuff. So, you know, if you want a message out there, use banners, use chalk, that sort of thing. Yeah, common sense. The police think they're never wrong. Someone asked earlier about the statements from Luke's friends who he was with at the time. So what were they asking about the statements? There were one, two, three. There were 3 friends plus Luke, so four statements. 3 of the statements said pretty much the same thing, and one said that Luke had said Jodie wasn't coming out that night. The others said that question wasn't asked, or that statement wasn't made. So we've got 3 people saying didn't happen. One person saying it did. Who do you think gave evidence? And again, I'm not going to read that out. Post office scandal was 2014 and they were free 2021. Oh no, the post office scandal was back way before 2014, I think. Maybe not. I don't have the details to hand on that one. What's your thoughts on the case getting an independent investigation within the next year or two? I'd certainly like to see moves in that direction, in that timescale, boxing enthusiast, which is why, you know, the letters to the MPs trying to get the equivalent of an APPG set up, pressure on our MSPs, your local MSPs. Anybody that's not had the letter by private message yet, if you, I'm not going to say if you message me because I'll end up with thousands of them. Okay, message me about the letters to the MPs, and I will then delegate to other people to get back to you. So you won't get necessarily a reply directly from me, but you will get the template letter one way or another. And that would be a really good way to start piling the pressure on for the equivalent of an APPG to start talking about this crisis in justice in Scotland. Well, peeps, our time is almost up. Oh, hi, Jerome. No. Mark McDonald's. No, you're going too fast now. Luke's case should be taken up with the MP and the UK government. The UK government has no say in Scottish justice matters. Justice is a devolved issue for Scotland, so it would have to be the Scottish Parliament that dealt with it. Anyway, time's up for today. Thank you all for joining me. Hopefully I'll be here as usual next Sunday, same time, same place. So thank you again for everything and everybody, and I will see you next week. Okay, bye. Bye-bye.